anniversary of the ACP group. Mesdames et messieurs, Excellences, bonjour et bienvenue au secrétariat ACP pour la célébration du 40e anniversaire du groupe ACP. I would like now to hand over to the moderator of the session, His Excellency, Dr. Ousmane SYLLA, Ambassadeur of Guinée. Excellence, vous avez la parole. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Excellence, Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, Son Excellence, Monsieur Sam KUTESA, Excellence, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, Dr. Gomes, Excellence, Madame l'Ambassadeur de l'Ouganda, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Excellences, Messieurs les ministres, il y en a qui sont là, vous m'excuserez. Chers invités, avant de commencer notre session, je voudrais vous prier d'observer une minute de silence à la mémoire des victimes d'un vaste incendie et de vastes inondations qui ont envahi hier la capitale d'un de nos pays membres, très important, la République du Ghana. Il y a eu à Accra, avant-hier, un vaste incendie dû à des orages et aussi une station-service qui a pris feu. La population s'était réfugiée sous la station. Malheureusement, elle a été prise là-bas entre les deux. D'abord, l'eau, parce que les canalisations étaient bouchées, l'eau n'a pas pu circuler. Et de deux, la station a brûlé. Et il y a eu beaucoup de victimes. Ceux qui ont vu à la télé hier ont presque vu Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République du Ghana, avec les larmes aux yeux. Je vous prie donc qu'on observe une minute de silence à la mémoire de ces victimes de cette catastrophe naturelle. S'il vous plaît. Excellences, Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Messieurs les ministres, Messieurs et Mesdames les ambassadeurs, sans tarder, pour gagner du temps, nous allons passer donc au thème d'aujourd'hui. Je tiens d'abord à remercier Son Excellence, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des ACP et tout le secrétariat et le comité d'organisation pour avoir eu l'idée d'organiser ce symposium à l'occasion du 40e anniversaire de notre chère organisation, les ACP. Monsieur le secrétaire général, je voudrais aussi vous remercier pour l'honneur que vous m'avez fait, donc à mon groupe aussi de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, en me demandant de modérer cette session du matin. Nous vous remercions beaucoup. Le thème de ce matin, mesdames et messieurs, c'est l'établissement de partenariats. Vous savez que 40 ans de mariage, c'est toujours beaucoup. Ça ne peut pas être assez, mais quelquefois beaucoup. Après 40 ans de mariage, l'époux et l'épouse se retrouvent, font le bilan, essaient de voir ce qui a marché, ce qui n'a pas marché, et essaient de voir comment ils vont mener ensemble leur ménage pendant les 40 prochaines années. C'est le cas des ACP et de l'Union européenne. Ça fait 40 ans que nous travaillons avec nos chers partenaires de l'Union européenne dans la confiance mutuelle et dans le bénéfice des deux parties. Et chaque côté étant conscient qu'en 2020, l'accord de Cotonou va expirer, chaque côté est en train actuellement de réfléchir avec des groupes de travail sur l'avenir des relations entre l'Union européenne et les ACP. Nous tenons à ces relations qui ont été très bénéfiques pour nous mais ensemble, nous allons redéfinir nos différentes relations. Mais conscients de cette dépendance excessive de l'Union européenne, les ACP avaient mis sur pied un groupe de travail sur les perspectives d'avenir, brillamment présidé par son Excellence Dr Gomes, secrétaire général des ACP, qui a mené un excellent travail et des conclusions. En même temps, l'Union européenne aussi nous a informé qu'elle a mis sur pied un task force qui aussi réfléchit sur l'après 2020. Nous espérons qu'à partir de cette année et l'année prochaine, petit à petit, nous allons réfléchir avec l'Union européenne comment établir des nouvelles relations entre nos deux parties. Mais il est bon que parallèlement à l'Union européenne, que les ACP réfléchissent, on en a déjà parlé hier, sur de nouveaux partenariats, pour qu'à l'horizon 2020, nous puissions diversifier nos partenariats, étant donné que nous tenons tous à ce que le groupe des ACP continue à vivre et à survivre. Alors, c'est dans ce cadre que la session de ce matin va écouter d'abord son Excellence, M. Sam KUTESA, président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Monsieur le Président, nous vous disons grand merci d'avoir fait ce long voyage de New York à Bruxelles. Et avec le décalage horaire, nous espérons que vous êtes quand même un peu reposés. Nous sommes heureux de vous avoir parce que nous tenons à faire une grande offensive envers les Nations Unies. Nous voulons que les ACP soient mieux connus à New York et que nous puissions aussi travailler surtout avec le groupe des 77 et avec tous nos représentants aux Nations Unies. Donc vraiment un grand merci. Nous disons aussi merci à son Excellence, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur de l'Inde, qui est là, qui va partager avec nous ses expériences. Son Excellence, Madame l'Ambassadeur du Brésil. Et enfin, M. Michel PRESUME, Vice-président du G7. Excellence, nous vous souhaitons à vous tous la bienvenue. Et nous allons passer sans tarder la parole à Madame l'Ambassadeur de l'Ouganda, qui a bien voulu accepter de nous présenter notre premier orateur, son Excellence, M. Sam KUTESA, président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Notre chère sœur, nous vous souhaitons aussi la bienvenue. Et sans tarder, nous allons vous passer la parole en précisant que Madame l'ambassadeur du Brésil doit se retirer bien avant et doit aller recevoir Madame la Présidente qui arrive pour le sommet entre l'Union européenne et l'Amérique latine. Donc, nous allons passer la parole sans tarder à Madame l'ambassadeur de l'Ouganda pour nous présenter notre éminent orateur. Je vous en prie.
Thank you very much, Chair of this important session and leading us today, Dr. SYLLA, the Secretary General of the ACP, Dr. Patrick Gomes, and of course our honored guest, as well as Your Excellencies, friends, distinguished delegates present here. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce His Excellency, Sam Kahamba KUTESA, who is here really in his capacity as the President of the General Assembly. So a bit awkward for me as Ambassador of Uganda because he is not here in that capacity and is now representing a much wider and larger body called the United Nations. So I still have the honor because we can never deny our backgrounds and where we come from. In fact, we are very proud of these achievements, and therefore I would like to just give you a few words of the background of His Excellency. His Excellency holds an honors degree in law from Makerere University in Uganda as an advocate of the High Court. He has been a member of parliament in Uganda for more than 3 decades and was very much involved in preparations of the drafting of the new constitution, which eventually was promulgated. Has been an Attorney General, has been a Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, served there being in charge of investment and later on in charge of planning and economic development. And therefore he's not a stranger to this room and to this house because he actually headed many of our ministerial council's delegation here in that capacity. So he's pleased, I think, to be back here on familiar grounds. He has a wide experience not only in political life and public life, but also worked in the private sector some time before that as a legal secretary for a large conglomerate called Lonro East Africa, practiced law in our country, etc. He played in his role as a Minister of Foreign Affairs a very key role in IGAT, in the regional processes in Sudan, South Sudan, stabilization in Somalia, especially as the chair of the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, also played an important role in establishing peace and security in the Great Lakes region, especially Eastern Congo. So as you can see, his wide knowledge and experience in private and public sector made him a very suitable candidate after having been endorsed by the African Union for the position of the President of the General Assembly, to which he was elected on the 11th of June 2014. At the time, he was our Minister of Foreign Affairs, but he had to take off his hat as such for a period that he's now serving the greater interest of the world. So I would like to basically say that we miss him very dearly at the moment in Uganda, but we hope that after serving his one-year term, he will return to Uganda in his capacity as a Minister of Foreign Affairs. We are very, very proud of you, Your Excellency, and we know that you are doing very well in that capacity. The feedback we have, your international presence, your commitment to serving the global world of the United Nations is impeccable. So I would hope to see you back home soon again, but don't come back before you have accomplished your tasks. So I would like to invite you to address this great audience, Your Excellency.
Merci beaucoup, Madame l'ambassadeur, pour cette excellente présentation de Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Avant de passer la parole à Monsieur le Président, je voudrais saluer parmi nous Son Excellence, Monsieur Demelo, Directeur général de la DEFCO, notre partenaire privilégié et qui a eu le temps de venir malgré les journées européennes du développement qui ont débuté hier, je crois, avec M. Juncker et beaucoup de partenaires qui sont venus de l'extérieur. Monsieur Demelo, nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue et vraiment nous sommes heureux que vous soyez parmi nous. Et comme nous le disons, nous espérons qu'après 2020, nous continuerons toujours notre travail ensemble. Je voudrais aussi souhaiter la bienvenue à son Excellence, Monsieur le ministre des Affaires étrangères de Comores, qui est parmi nous. Excellence, Monsieur le ministre, le fait d'avoir fait ce long voyage des Comores jusqu'à Bruxelles, hier vous étiez là déjà, prouve l'importance que votre pays accorde aux ACP et nous vous en sommes très très reconnaissants d'avoir accepté d'être parmi nous à cet instant solennel. Excellence, Monsieur le ministre, nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue. Comme je l'ai dit, ce matin, nous allons parler des partenariats, des futurs partenariats possibles entre les ACP et les autres partenaires, notamment il y a l'Inde, le Brésil, la Turquie et beaucoup d'autres pays. Sans tarder donc, pour gagner du temps, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je vais passer la parole à Monsieur le Président pour son adresse. Monsieur le Président doit, comme vous le savez, il est très pris aux Nations Unies, il doit nous quitter directement après son discours, mais il est prêt, après son exposé, à prendre quelques questions et à échanger avec nous avant qu'il ne nous quitte pour retourner à New York, où beaucoup de travail l'attend. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, Mr. Demelo from the European Union, Secretary General of the ACP Group, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to join you today for this important commemoration of the 40th anniversary of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of States, ACP. The ACP, which brings together 79 developing countries across 3 continents, is a unique organization. It continues to play an important role in fostering unity and solidarity amongst members around its core values and objectives. Indeed, over the past 4 decades, much work has been done towards ensuring that the concerns, interests, and needs of its member states are addressed and initiatives taken in the areas of sustainable development and poverty eradication, peace and security, as well as the promotion of human rights and good governance. It is therefore fitting, as the ACP Group takes stock of achievements and challenges in the vital partnerships between the ACP and the European Union, to focus on how it can be strengthened in the new global order. As I have said before, this is a truly momentous year. We are currently engaged in 3 interlinked processes that will define our collective development path for the next 15 years and beyond. We have to ensure that the post-2015 development agenda to be adopted by world leaders in September is ambitious, transformative, and transforms economies, improves people's livelihoods and protects our planet. To do so, we will need a successful outcome from the 3rd International Conference of Financing for Development to be held in July in Addis Ababa, with action-oriented deliverables to support the implementation of the new development agenda. Achieving success in Addis Ababa will also boost our chances of reaching a binding agreement on climate change in December in Paris. In all these important processes, the core objective is eradication of poverty, promotion of growth, and achievement of sustainable development in its social, economic, and environmental dimensions. There is also increasing emphasis on renewing and strengthening the global partnership for development. Most of these are issues on which the ACP states and AU have been and will continue to be engaged in. Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, one of the main strengths of the ACP group of states is its dynamism and commitment to improving trade and economic cooperation in order to transform their economies, improve competitiveness, and increase their share of world trade. While some progress has been registered in this regard, it is inadequate that a group with a combined population of 900 million people contributes less than 5% of world trade and only 1.9% of global GDP. By contrast, the EU, with a population of about 500 million people, contributes over 16% of global trade and 17% of global GDP. To be successful in the new global order, ACP countries will have to devise new and better strategies, positioning the group to become more competitive in the 21st century. It is encouraging that some work is being done to reorient the group with a view to making it fit for purpose, and these rapidly changing and complex times. I would like to pay tribute to the efforts of the ACP members to revitalize the activities of the group in terms of its legal status, functions, and strategic role. It is crucial to further enhance and deepen the level of cooperation and coordination amongst the membership of the group with the European Union and other partners. Why is this so important? To answer that question, one has to look at the major trends and challenges facing the world today. There are still residual effects of the global economic and financial crisis that should be addressed. Rising inequality, climate change, a resurgence of geopolitical competition, emerging threats like terrorism and violent extremism, among others. To remain an influential actor in the new global order, the ACP states have to reposition the work of the group, improve its competitiveness, and strengthen representation in global governance structures. The need to diversify economies and reduce commodity dependence cannot be overemphasized. Though ACP states may belong to different groups in intergovernmental organizations, it is essential to support and coalesce around their common interests and those of their members in special situations such as least developed countries, landlocked countries, and small island developing states. Collectively, and with the support of development partners, ACP countries need to address infrastructure deficits, especially in energy and transport, which constrain industrialization and value addition to their commodities and natural resources. In this context, the upcoming Financing for Development Conference should result in the adoption of measures or policies aimed at facilitating access by developing countries to affordable long-term funding for critical infrastructure projects. It is also critical to address the enabling domestic and international environment for development, including on issues related to debt relief and trade, as well as the systemic issues, including the reform of global governance and international financial systems. Ladies and gentlemen, the important role that the EU and its member states play in developing finance cooperation through the various ACP-EU agreements is commendable. This is a good example of how South-to-South and North-South cooperation can be complementary. As a mutually beneficial post-Cotonou partnership of 2020 and beyond is being envisaged, it will be important to build on this foundation, taking into account the lessons learned and addressing persistent challenges, including those related to Economic Partnership Agreements, EPAs, will be very crucial. The ACP Group has worked to promote regional cooperation and integration as a main priority since its founding 40 years ago. Indeed, regional initiatives contribute to strengthening peace and security and addressing root causes of conflict. The prospects of the ACP Group in the new global order are bright, provided it optimizes its strengths and seizes opportunities. ACP countries should enhance economic power by boosting productive capacities and competitiveness in order to increase their share of global trade. They should also further strengthen intra-ACP cooperation, taking advantage of their combined population, diversity, and different levels of development. Above all, we should all work together, developed and developing countries, to improve the livelihoods of all people and protect our planet. I thank you for your kind attention.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Nous remercions Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies pour ce brillant exposé. Avant, comme je vous l'ai dit, il doit nous quitter plus tôt. Avant d'ouvrir les débats, permettez-moi de saluer parmi nous aussi l'un de nos partenaires privilégiés et avec qui personnellement je me suis rendu en Guinée. Je ne savais pas qu'il est dans la salle. C'est M. Nick Westcott, le directeur Afrique du service extérieur de l'Union européenne. Monsieur Westcott, nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue. Et merci d'avoir fait le déplacement pour assister à cet entretien. Merci beaucoup. Maintenant, est-ce qu'il y a des remarques? Oui, il est prêt à répondre à quelques questions avant qu'il ne se retire dans quelques instants. Le débat est ouvert, mesdames et messieurs les ambassadeurs, chers invités. Ce n'est pas tous les jours que nous avons un président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies parmi nous. Donc, il est important que... le débat, donc tout est clair, quoi. L'exposé de Monsieur le Président. Oui, mon cher ami, Monsieur l'ambassadeur de Guinée-Bissau.
Merci. Vous savez combien je suis attaché aux Nations Unies. Je voudrais donc, si vous le permettez, saluer les distingués invités qui sont là et qui nous honorent de manière très singulière par leur présence et qui, encore une fois, au travers de leur participation à ce symposium, témoignent à la fois de l'intérêt qu'ils portent au groupe ACP et surtout à la coopération que nous avons nouée avec eux, avec leurs organisations, dans l'intérêt bien compris des populations que nous représentons. Monsieur le modérateur, je voudrais saluer la présence exceptionnelle, comme vous l'avez fait remarquer, du président de la 69e session de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Nous sommes tous autour de cette table et au-delà, membres de cette grande famille des Nations Unies. C'est donc dire, Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale, qu'en décidant de répondre à notre invitation, vous avez satisfait aux aspirations que nous avions tous ici, c'est-à-dire celle de voir le président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies nous rendre visite et surtout nous apporter le message d'espoir que nous attendons de la part de cette organisation mondiale. Kofi Annan a dit un jour que la seule voie qui permette un espoir à l'humanité tout entière est celle de la coopération et du partenariat. C'est donc dire toute l'importance que revêt pour nous et pour l'ensemble de la communauté internationale cette notion fondatrice des relations d'abord humaines, des relations de coopération et partant de l'établissement de ponts qui sont nécessaires pour la compréhension des peuples et pour la mise en marche de cette dynamique que nous appelons de tous nos voeux, qui s'appelle tout simplement le développement humain, pour reprendre un terme cher au PNUD, aux Nations Unies donc. Monsieur le Président, vous avez parlé de partenariat. Aujourd'hui, tout le monde est convaincu que ce n'est que grâce et surtout au travers du partenariat que nous pouvons d'abord nous comprendre, que nous pouvons mettre sur pied des mécanismes idoines qui puissent répondre au mieux aux défis qui sont nombreux, défis du développement, défis de la paix et de la sécurité internationale. En tant que président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, vous nous apportez aussi ce message qui consiste à nous rappeler, à nous interpeller, à nous dire qu'il faut davantage joindre nos efforts, qu'il faut fédérer toutes nos possibilités, toutes nos potentialités. Parce que c'est ça le partenariat. Le partenariat, c'est d'abord la reconnaissance d'objectifs communs et la mise en commun des ressources, des connaissances, qu'elles soient technologiques, scientifiques ou autres. Voilà donc un sujet qui nous fédère et que nous devons aborder de manière holistique pour faire en sorte que chacun puisse y trouver son compte. Que les peuples que nous représentons puissent, au travers de ce partenariat, se rendre compte que oui, en mettant sur pied des mécanismes qui nous permettent d'assurer le plein développement de nos États, nous pouvons contribuer à cet objectif majeur qui nous interpelle tous, celui du maintien de la paix et de la sécurité internationale, qui est sous la responsabilité des Nations Unies, du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies notamment. Donc je voudrais, au nom de mon pays, vous saluer votre présence et abonder dans le même sens que notre distingué collègue de l'Ouganda pour saluer votre personne, votre éminente personne. Vous êtes assurément l'un des représentants les plus insignes de l'Ouganda au travers de votre parcours, de ce qui a été jusqu'ici votre parcours, parce que nous comptons encore sur votre expérience pour que ce parcours, pour que ce cheminement continue avec votre pays, mais avec l'ensemble de la communauté internationale. Merci d'être venu et ce partenariat, nous entendons bien sûr le consolider avec tous les pays du monde, d'abord avec nos partenaires principaux en ce qui nous concerne, nous, Groupe ACP, avec l'Union européenne, mais aussi nous ouvrir le monde, c'est dans sa globalité qu'il faut le voir, dans ses aspirations les plus légitimes, dans sa diversité culturelle, philosophique, religieuse. C'est ça qui fonde l'humanité. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Je vois qu'il y a 4 collègues qui veulent intervenir. Il faudrait qu'on m'aide pour les identifier. il y a l'Afrique du Sud et l'Éthiopie. Maintenant, les deux derrière, il faudrait qu'on me les signale après. Excellence, Monsieur l'ambassadeur de l'Afrique du Sud. Pardon, avant que vous ne preniez la parole, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, je voudrais souhaiter la bienvenue aussi à Mme Silva Aldera du Conseil de l'Union européenne qui nous a fait l'honneur d'être parmi nous. Bonne arrivée, Madame. Merci beaucoup. Monsieur l'ambassadeur de l'Afrique du Sud, vous avez la parole.
Yes. Well, thanks very much, Chairperson. And let me also take this opportunity to extend our hearty and our warm welcome to His Excellency Dr. Sam KUTESA, the President of the General Assembly of the UN. Minister, we're very happy to have you here, and I'm quite certain that your presence here is a further reaffirmation of the connection between the ACP and the broader multilateral system as represented by the UN General Assembly. Minister, I would like you to respond to two questions. One, to update us on the status with regards to the UN reform process. This year is the 70th anniversary of the UN, and there was a lot of expectation that on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the UN would have made significant strides with regards to the reform of the UN and its organs to reflect the current realities. But it does seem that we have lost momentum in advancing this agenda of reforming the institutions of global governance. And I'm quite keen to know what steps, what measures are being contemplated in the next 6 months or so of your mandate to revive, to give a new impetus, to lend a new momentum to this process of reforming the UN. Because I'm quite certain that all of us agree that the reform of the institutions of global governance is critical for altering the power balance in the global system, but also is critical for ensuring that there's fairness and justice, particularly for countries of the developing world, of which the ACP has got the largest concentration. Secondly, Chair, I'm quite keen to hear the response of the President of the General Assembly to a proposition to establish a platform of the ACP countries in the context of the General Assembly, a debate as an informal caucus, similar to the caucuses of the non-aligned movement of G77 plus China. In your view, would this add a new dynamism to the debates in New York, or would it complicate matters? Do you think that the views, the positions, perspectives of ACP countries with the largest concentration of LDCs is adequately reflected in the current structures in New York within the framework of the General Assembly? In other words, does the G77 plus China, for example, adequately reflect the interests of ACP countries? If the view is that the current structures in New York do not adequately reflect and represent the perspectives of ACP countries, then surely there should be a case then for creating space and a platform for the establishment of an ACP platform in the family of organizations of the South in the General Assembly. These are the two questions that I would like to get feedback from the President of the General Assembly. Thank you, Chairperson.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, pour ces intéressantes questions. Et j'ai ensuite sur la liste le Kenya, il y a l'Éthiopie, le Gabon et le Kenya. L'Éthiopie a la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I would like to join my two colleagues who spoke before me in welcoming the President of the United Nations General Assembly. I'm welcoming him on behalf of my country, and then on behalf of IGAD, is one of his constituencies actually, who strongly supported him to assume this responsibility. We are very proud, President, that the work you have been doing so far, and then certainly the pride and satisfaction is not only for Uganda, but it is for us, all of us in the region, in the continent, and of course for the whole family of United Nations, which you are currently serving. You can count on our continued support, and certainly you have addressed very important key issues that are very vital for the group you have just addressed here. Mr. President, the ACP is at its crossroad. We are looking at its future perspective, how ACP will feature in beyond 2020. And as my distinguished and able colleague from South Africa said, we want to send you with a message back to New York, such that how would you really promote and advocate the agenda that we are working on in our future of this group. The group has come a very long way, and the statistics you have mentioned actually speak very loudly. It's a very big group in terms of demography. It's a very big group in terms of membership, but its position in terms of social and economic standing is very low. We are working hard, and of course we have a very strong solidarity in this family. So what should we expect from your presence here when you go back? So we want you to really take this message very seriously and then be our advocate and promoter at the General Assembly until you successfully conclude your presidency in New York. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur l'ambassadeur de l'Éthiopie. Je passe la parole à notre sœur, Madame l'ambassadeur du Gabon.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. C'est pour la première fois que je prends la parole. Et à ce titre, je voudrais remercier le secrétaire général des ACP, notre groupe, les collègues ambassadeurs qui animent cette session ce matin sur l'établissement des partenariats. Bien entendu, les organisateurs de cet événement qui nous réunit. Je remercie également et félicite d'ailleurs le président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies pour sa participation. Et dans sa communication, il a évoqué les 3 grandes conférences de 2015, celle d'Addis Abeba, celle de New York et ensuite celle de Paris. Et en ma qualité de président du sous-comité développement durable aux ACP, je souhaiterais connaître le sentiment du président sur le changement climatique, plus précisément sur le futur accord de Paris, et aussi s'il a des orientations dans ce sens à donner aux ACP. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Excellence. Je passe la parole au dernier orateur, notre frère l'ambassadeur du Kenya.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Allow me to join previous speakers in appreciating this morning the presence among us, the grand son of Uganda, who is widely claimed. But in this particular moment, Mr. President, I want to speak briefly representing the East Africa community. The ambassador of Ethiopia and the current chair of IGAD has spoken on the pride that we have in terms of the very many issues that are there. And also the ambassadors of South Africa and Guinea-Bissau have raised quite a number of issues that I really wanted to reflect on. But before I go further, let me also congratulate Ambassador BLAAK for her diligent effort in getting the President of the General Assembly, together with the assistance and support of the Secretary General and yourself, to be here with us this morning. Mr. Chairman, I also want to take very seriously the presence here of Dr. Westcott and His Excellency Di Mello to demonstrate the support and cooperation that we have between ACP and their respective institutions. Mention has been made of the key meetings in the calendar of the global calendar, particularly the climate change meeting in Paris. But Mr. Chairman, as you are aware, ahead of the meeting in, immediately after the meeting in Paris, there will be the WTO 10th Ministerial Conference in Nairobi. And this is another important global forum for which we have very high expectations about the management and administration of the multilateral trading system. There's been a lot of discussions, Mr. President, on what the developing countries feel ought to come out of Nairobi and how that will relate and impact on the negotiations that we have with our key trading partner, in some instances the European Union, and more specifically on the road to progress on the economic partnership agreements. Yesterday, Mr. President, you remember, we had a short discussion on what is going on in the Caribbean, arising out of the 7 or 8 years of the experience in these partnership agreements. But that's not the subject for today. President of the General Assembly, let me assure you that we are very, very much determined to advance, protect, and promote the interests of the ACP here within the framework of the Cotonou Agreement and the discussions that are going on right now. Would want you to take the message of support, particularly in what was raised by the Ambassador of South Africa, for which we have discussed in this room several times, on the need to have our voice heard in New York in a more elaborate and formal process. We are ready to make this proposal and hear you on it, so that in the coming council meetings, we can start the framework of making sure that that actually happens. Finally, let me wish you a safe journey back to New York, and do hope that you'll be able to represent us there as you've effectively done, and get back to us as has been always your case when you served in other positions. I thank and congratulate you, sir.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Excellence, Monsieur le Président, vous voyez que votre présence parmi nous a été extrêmement utile. C'est la première fois, en tout cas depuis que je suis là, que nous recevons Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Plusieurs diplomates parmi nous ont servi à New York, connaissent bien les Nations Unies. Donc sans tarder, je vous passe la parole pour répondre à certaines questions et les remarques qui ont été faites. Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank all of you for your kind words and your warmth of reception. Let me start by first saying that I think that the partnership between ACP and EU has been one of the most enduring and successful partnerships globally. And I think you should congratulate yourselves on this. We should all congratulate ourselves on this. Now, related to the number of issues that were raised, His Excellency, the representative of Guinea-Bissau, and many other contributors to this discussion raised the issue of the voice and the visibility of ACP in New York at the UN. It is true that the majority of members here belong to the Group of 77 plus China. But that's not a hindrance at all, in my view, to your caucus being heard and being encouraged to be visible, to be contributing. I think that we should get together, and because you have a way in which you can help in coordination, and also talk about your success story, because some of these are not very successful organizations. They have done very well in bringing people together. They've done well in bringing people to negotiate together, but they probably have not had partnerships that are functional. What is the partnership that the Group of 77 has had that is functional? You can bring your experience to bear on the Group of 77. And I can say that for one, while I'm still there, I would like to encourage to have you people and have your voice heard. And I also want to strengthen, as I had said to the Secretary General before in our discussion this morning, that I think we should strengthen your observer status and make sure that that one is functional and you are able to come and you are invited and you have a place, pride to talk in the United Nations. So I am quite happy to work very closely with your Secretary General to see that we can enhance your visibility, strengthen your observer status, and get you involved in these discussions. Look, there are many groupings. You have European Union. There is a grouping called Voies, which is Western European countries in New York. But it doesn't stop the other from having a voice. You are you belong to a Group of 77, but you can also talk as ACP, like European Union does within WEOG. And I think that example would be helpful for you to emulate. His Excellency, the Ambassador of South Africa, raised the issue of the UN reform process. And you're quite right, Your Excellency. 70 years ago, when the United Nations was formed, there were only 51 countries. We are now 193 countries. The development, both political and economic, have far outstripped the structures that were formed then. Many countries here, when I look around, were not independent at the time of the formation of the United Nations. They are now fully fledged members. Where is their voice? Where is their status? I know that for Africa, at that time only Ethiopia and Liberia were independent. Out of 54 countries, the 52 were colonies. Now they are independent countries. I'm sure the same goes for other regions. Then from the economic standpoint, new economic forces have emerged. And these impact on development, they impact on peace and security, they impact on the rule of law, which are the main pillars for why the United Nations was formed. So the case for reform cannot be overemphasized. But I want to say what has been going on. The call for reforming the United Nations Security Council, revitalizing of the General Assembly, looking at the working methods between the two, was made by our heads of states in 2000, the year 2000. It's almost 20 years now. Each grouping has stated their positions over and over again. The African group talks about the Zurich consensus. There is a group called the G4, which is Brazil, India, Germany, Japan. They have also stated their position on how they want the reforms to be. There is a group called United for Consensus, which is led largely by Italy, Pakistan, Argentina, and others. Then you have the permanent five themselves as a grouping. Now, each of us have been stating our position year in, year out, year in, year out, in what was called the intergovernmental negotiation process. So we have really been restating our positions, restating them year in, year out, as I said, and we almost sound like a broken record. So the intergovernmental negotiations process has done everything else except to negotiate. When I came in, I promised, and I made it one of my priorities. I said that we must move this process from just restating our positions. And I appointed the chairman of this the NGI forum, the Ambassador Orateur from Jamaica. And I said the outcome must be a text which can be a basis for negotiations, so that we start the negotiations. We are working on a text which synthesizes the areas of convergence and then those ones we can put aside. Then we only begin to negotiate on areas where we have divergence. And I think that by the end of this month, he has put out a document. The document has been populated by all the groups almost. And I think we see movement even within the permanent members. There are people who really recognize the need of the Security Council, for example. So I hope that by end of June, we shall have a text and then negotiations begin, because that hasn't happened for the last 20 years. So that's how far you can move some of these processes. Getting countries to agree on one thing is a Herculean task, to say the least. But at least we must make movement, and I think we are doing so. In the case of the General Assembly, I have also set up, I have appointed two chairs. One is from Namibia, the permanent representative, and the other one is from Slovakia. And they are leading a process on reforming and revitalizing the General Assembly itself to make it more efficient and to make it more effective. And to make it take its rightful position rather than being, subsumed by the Security Council. We are now talking about even the selection of the Secretary General. How do we select the Secretary General? What is the role of the General Assembly? This is the key chief executive of the world body, and we think that the membership of the entire world should have a say in how he's appointed and who is appointed. We are talking about also strengthening the institutional memory of the presidency of the General Assembly. We are talking about the relationship between Security Council and the General Assembly itself. And so these are reforms that are going on, and I think, again, by July we shall have a report which will be discussed by the membership. So there is progress now, I think. It's not sufficient, but it's noteworthy in my view. Again, the other issue that you raised was the one which had been raised by our colleague from Guinea-Bissau about the visibility of ACP at the UN. And I think that is the same answers I gave earlier. Our colleague His Excellency the Ambassador of Ethiopia, what do we see as ACP after 2020? What do we expect from you when you go back to New York? I can only espouse what I think is important. And as I said earlier, I think this is the most durable and I think viable partnership that we know. And I think we should use it as an example because we are all now talking about partnerships. Partnerships between North and South, partnerships between South and South. And I think that the role that ACP can play is invaluable. And as I said with the Secretary General here, I would like to work closely with him and see that we can enhance your presence in New York. The discussions that are going on in New York, mainly on the Sustainable Development Agenda, are really the issues that you discuss here yourselves. They're exactly the same issues. We are just replicating them in different fora. The post-2015 development agenda must be universal, it must be transformative, it must change the lives of people, it must end hunger, it must bring about inclusive growth. And when you think about it, what you are doing here is exactly that. That's what you are discussing. And I think that we should speak with one voice. Our colleague from Ethiopia, I'm sure is aware about the conference the summit that is taking place in Ethiopia from July 13th, 16th of this year for financing for development. It is all very well to have a great agenda, all very well to have great targets, all very well even to put up indicators of performance. But if you don't find the means of implementation, the resources, it remains a beautiful piece of literature. And I don't think that's what we want. So Ethiopia and Addis must be successful. And it must be successful because we must have deliverables from Addis. Because if that doesn't happen, New York in September won't be a success, and Paris in December won't be a success either. And in this case, in this sense, I would like to congratulate the EU for its stand, the recent stand of making sure that they be paying, honoring their commitment of 0.7% of their GNP, and the commitment to giving money to the least developing, certain portions of it, to the least developed countries. So together, I think we should work on that agenda, and it is very, very important. One of the reasons I came here was to drum up support to ensure that Addis is attended at a very high level so that we can make commitments for the future. That's my takeaway from here and what I hope we can do. And I would implore you to make sure that whatever resources, whatever connections you have here, we ensure that Addis is a success. The distinguished Ambassador of Gabon talked about climate change and what are your views. I personally think that, not personally, but I think that generally it has come, there has never been greater appetite than now to reach some kind of binding agreement in the world. Europe has already moved and committed themselves what they want to do by 2020 in terms of reduction of emissions. The voices that we hear between China and the United States are encouraging. They are more encouraging than they have ever been before. And we think that there is greater appetite now. Now, the important thing, and I have had discussions with the people involved in financing climate change as well. And one point I have made repeatedly clear, that there is need to restore trust in the developing world about commitments and and statements of what is going to be done. Therefore, repeatedly we should hear about the commitment for the 100 billion for climate change. Sometimes we talk about it as if it's a one-off, but it is supposed to be 100 billion per annum after 2020. There have been so many promises that sometimes have not come true, and there is need to restore confidence in the developing world to know that the agreement they are entering into will be honored. And I think there is increasingly more realization that that is crucial for us to have an agreement in Paris. The other thing is, what kind of agreement or what kind of document should we have in Paris? My views is that we should consider to have a document that has binding effect, but does not need the rigorous procedures of ratification. I mean, it's not a secret that President Clinton once committed himself, and when he went back, Congress couldn't ratify. I'm not so sure that the situation has changed completely. Yeah? Same situation. So I think we need to find a document cleverly crafted that has binding effect, but does not require ratification, because we know the difficulties that there will be in having that approved. So there are people working on this kind of document. As a matter of fact, progress has been made. Now I attended the meeting in Lima last December, Lima in Peru, and progress has been made. Discussions have continued both in Geneva and Berlin. On the 29th of June, I'm convening a high-level thematic debate, which is going to be very well attended by many ministers from Europe, from the US, from Africa, on climate change, so that we can continue the momentum. So we don't lose the momentum before Paris in December. So we have that meeting. And I'm sure most of you here are aware about the effects of climate change. For some island states, it really presents an existential threat for them. The rising waters, ocean levels. Even for us, I always give an example. In my own country, we have mountains called Mountains of the Moon. And they have, although we are at the equator, they have snow caps. Kilimanjaro has snow caps. In the case of the Mountains of the Moon, at the beginning of the last century, the snow on top of that mountain at the equator covered 2.7 square miles. As we speak today, it only covers 0.41 of a square mile. So it's not just about islands like Kiribati that will be submerged, but even ourselves here in Africa, on tops of mountains, the climate change effects are visible. It affects food security, it affects agriculture, it affects, really it can even bring conflict and wars. So I think it is a very important thing that we all should work towards, but make sure that there are resources for mitigation and adaptation. Then we must think about technology. If we are going to talk about green technology, who finances it? How do we finance it? These are issues that are going to be of critical importance in reaching this agreement. And I think, I always hear that, the least developed countries will be most affected by climate change. That may be true, but we have seen now that we live in a globalized world. Insecurity anywhere is a threat to security everywhere. If anybody needs to see this, you don't have to look very far. These migration problems are but a simple illustration of where there is insecurity, where there is conflict, where there is lack of opportunities. It affects those where opportunities apparently exist. Thank you very much, representative of Kenya. I quite agree with you entirely that one of the things that we should look at in terms of financing future development agenda, one of them is a fair trade regime so that we can access markets. We need a fair trading regime. And Nairobi will be important when WTO gets there. Because unless we have a fair trading regime, how do we finance sustainably the development agenda? I think sustainable development agenda will be achieved only if those ones who are supposed to be developed are brought to a level where they can sustainably finance their development. How do you finance your development? In my view, you expand revenue collection, domestic revenue collection. You add value to your raw materials. You get market access through trading regimes. Then you can even use aid to leverage for greater finances so as to be able to invest in infrastructure. Aid is very wonderful, but it can never, there is no single nation that has ever developed out of aid. You must deal with the fundamentals of the economy, have transformation, be able to invest in electricity, be able to invest in road and rail transport, be able to invest in ICT, be able to commercialize agriculture, and then have markets for and access to your goods. So I think Nairobi will be very important, and I don't want to take more of your time, but I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Il va se retirer parce que New York appelle. Et vraiment, merci pour toutes ces réponses. Et je pense que ça a été extrêmement intéressant et très utile. Nous vous souhaitons un excellent retour à New York. Et vous êtes notre ambassadeur à New York, Monsieur le ministre. Et nous espérons donc que les ACP vont continuer à tout faire pour avoir un statut d'observateur aux Nations Unies, en tout cas avoir une plateforme de présence aux Nations Unies. Merci beaucoup d'être venu et nous vous souhaitons un très bon retour. Merci beaucoup. Bien, mesdames et messieurs, nous allons continuer. Les organisateurs m'ont fait la remarque qu'il faut que nous terminons à 12h30 à cause d'un agenda très chargé. Je propose donc que les questions et les interventions après soient très brèves pour que nous puissions finir à 12h30. Avant de continuer, je voudrais saluer parmi nous et leur souhaiter la bienvenue à son Excellence Monsieur l'Ambassadeur de Turquie qui est parmi nous. Et depuis hier, nous avons un autre ministre qui est parmi nous, très modestement retiré. Son Excellence M. Michel PRESUME, secrétaire d'État de la République d'Haïti à la planification, qui a fait aussi le long déplacement de Port-au-Prince jusqu'à Bruxelles. Excellence, Monsieur le ministre, nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue. Merci d'être venu. Donc, nous allons tout de suite prendre les prochains exposés ensemble. Il y a d'abord son Excellence Mme MACHADO, ambassadeur du Brésil. Ensuite, son Excellence M. Singh, l'ambassadeur de l'Inde. Et son Excellence Monsieur le ministre de la République d'Haïti. Je passe la parole à Mme MACHADO, s'il vous plaît.
Son Excellence Ousmane SYLLA, je vous remercie beaucoup pour prendre la parole. Je suis dans un jour enfin un peu pressé parce que ma présidente arrive ici pour le grand sommet EU-CELAC. Ce seront 61 pays ensemble. Il faut encore enfin prendre des mesures pour que tout se passe bien. Je suis très contente d'être ici, très honorée par l'invitation que vous m'avez donnée, Patrick Gomes. Je ne peux pas résister à l'invitation de Patrick Gomes parce qu'il est le représentant d'abord de l'ACP et après parce qu'il est le représentant aussi du seul pays ACP qui appartient à notre région géographique, l'Amérique du Sud. Alors, je suis très contente. Et aussi très contente de voir les sujets très importants pour les pays en développement, y inclut le Brésil, auxquels j'étais chargée quand j'étais sous-secrétaire générale pour les affaires politiques. Alors, les Nations Unies, dans tous ces aspects politiques, passaient aussi par mon dossier. Je crois que le Brésil donne un support, un appui important à quelques projets, à beaucoup de projets des ACP. Nous sommes là pour donner un boost, un élan plus grand au développement des pays ACP, pas seulement parmi les programmes multilatéraux, mais aussi par la présence du Brésil dans beaucoup de vos pays. Et surtout, il y a une atmosphère de brotherhood entre nous qui, je crois, crée toute une ambiance très importante pour le développement sans aucun obstacle entre nos deux pays. Je crois que la réunion d'aujourd'hui et les paroles de Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale ont été très intéressantes pour moi, pour une rencontre avec les Nations Unies. Les problèmes que le Brésil et tous les pays en développement avaient, et surtout les pays qui sont des aspirants à être membres permanents du Conseil de sécurité ont été posés. Je vois aussi que mon collègue et mon ami, l'ambassadeur de l'Inde, a un exposé, enfin des déclarations sur un sujet qui m'est très très intime. C'est IBAS. J'étais l'ambassadeur du Brésil en Inde quand l'idée de création de ce groupe a été formée. Et je crois qu'on doit beaucoup aussi à des personnages dans le gouvernement indien, mais aussi à mon ministre des Affaires étrangères à ce temps-là, qui était Celso Amorim, qui est très active dans les Nations Unies, et qui, un jour, il a visité l'Inde, je crois que pour la première fois dans mon mandat. Il a dit, mais ici, vraiment, il y a une communion d'intérêts très grande avec le Brésil et l'Inde. Il faut créer un groupe et il faut que l'Afrique ait un représentant dans ce groupe. Alors, IBAS a été créé à cause de cette convergence d'intérêts et de bases de coopération qui était donnée. Et vraiment, je crois qu'on doit ça, cette idée, par d'autres. Il était une personne très créative, à la création de ce groupe et qui marche très bien, qui a des projets intéressants et qui apporte une importance dans le scénario international. Je crois que mes tâches qui sont à présent devant moi m'obligent à vous laisser, malheureusement, parce que je voudrais bien être ici pendant toute la durée de cette grande commémoration, 40 ans de création de l'ACP. C'est une date qui mérite toutes les commémorations. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence. Nous comprenons que vous deviez nous quitter avec l'arrivée de Madame la Présidente pour le sommet Union européenne-Amérique latine. Merci beaucoup. Et nous souhaitons plein succès à ce sommet. L'année dernière, il y a eu le sommet Afrique-Union européenne. Et nous savons qu'il y a beaucoup de travail à faire quand il y a un sommet. Merci beaucoup. Sans tarder, je passe la parole à son Excellence, Monsieur l'ambassadeur de l'Inde. Excellence, Monsieur Singh, vous avez la parole. Monsieur PURI, please.
Mr. Chairman, Ambassador SYLLA, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Ambassador SYLLA, first of all, I want to thank you, ACP, and of course Ambassador Gomes, because I am absolutely delighted to be at home here. This is the second time that I'm speaking in this room, and I must say, if that great possibility has come about for a second time in 18 months, the amount of pleasure, the amount of good feeling, and the feeling that I'm here and being able to participate and learn on matters which are not only of our joint interest, but of great interest to me, coming from a developing country, makes me all the more delighted and thrilled, and I want to thank you very much. And I must say thank you very much for giving me the honor to be in the room along with the President of the General Assembly. So thank you very much in various ways. Your Excellency, I will endeavor to take off from where Ambassador Verra Machado, who was there at the founding of the IBSA, stopped. I am, of course, very happy here to speak about India, Brazil, South Africa Forum IBSA. Of course, also taking into account the fact that one of the three pillars of IBSA, the three countries which form IBSA, South Africa is a member of the ACP, and that gives me even greater pleasure and honor to be here and to speak. Mr. Chairman, before I speak about IBSA, please allow me to say just a few words about my country, India, and our friendship and partnership with all the countries in the ACP group. We have, of course, been bound together in solidarity on so many global issues, political and, of course, economic. But we are also bound together in the greatest challenge that we all face, which is the challenge of development, the challenge of poverty eradication, and a better life for our people. In 1964, India began a cooperation program called the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. Over the year, thousands of colleagues from developing countries across the world, we have had the privilege of having them at our training institutions, sharing our experiences, and making available whatever we can share in a spirit of solidarity with those from people and those officials, those experts from countries across the world in the developing world, most of whom are from the ACP countries. A few years back, in an effort to step up this cooperation, the Government of India set up a development partnership administration in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it is today headed by a permanent secretary level officer in our ministry. I say this because this is the strength of our commitment of sharing our experiences, of sharing our abilities and capacities, and doing so for mutual benefit, i.e. win-win situations. Because we firmly believe that in all these cooperations, whether they are training, whether they are investments, South-South cooperation is one in which there is mutuality of interest, and we very firmly believe and support this particular aspect of all of us going together. Mr. Chairman, let me congratulate the ACP on your 40th anniversary. I also want to let you know that on the 6th of June next year, 6th of June, i.e. tomorrow, we will complete 12 years of IBSA. Ambassador Machado had referred to meetings at the time when she was ambassador in India, which is the early 2000s. But on 6th of June, India, Brazil, and South Africa, 3 developing countries from the South, from different continents, with multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious, and multicultural societies, sharing principles of pluralism, tolerance, and multiculturalism, came together to create this unique forum for South-South partnership. This forum has 3 pillars of cooperation. Firstly, there's a consultative pillar on coordination on global and regional political issues. There is also an IBSA summit. Secondly, we concentrate for trilateral cooperation on concrete areas and projects for the common benefit of these 3 countries and for other countries. And thirdly, we have a small but very interesting fund which we run along with the UNDP called the IBSA Trust Fund. IBSA is very open and flexible. It does not have a headquarters or a permanent executive secretariat, but we have meetings at summit level, at ministerial level, and at the level of officials. The framework of IBSA also provides for interaction among civil society and other important sections of the society through people-to-people contacts. Indeed, the IBSA framework intends to bring the partnership closer to people by addressing their problems directly and giving them a voice to express their opinions. Insofar as the IBSA Trust Fund is concerned, as I mentioned to you, it is our moderate contribution to development partnership. The fund envisages $1 million contribution by each of the countries every year. It began in 2004 with a modest initial corpus of $3 million, but today it has grown to an accumulated capital of over 30 million, with projects being implemented across the globe in developing countries. The themes that the fund explores have objectives such as promoting food security through development of agriculture and livestock, addressing HIV/AIDS. We have projects in Burundi, extending access to safe drinking water. We have a desalination project in Cape Verde, capacity building, building of hospitals for children with special needs. We have an ongoing project in Palestine, all with the singular aim of contributing to the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals and henceforth the post-2015 development agenda. Last year, 3 major initiatives, new initiatives were approved. One was the reconstruction of the Atta Habib Medical Center in Palestine, a socio-economic integration of children and youth project in Haiti, and the conservation of agriculture, permaculture, and fisheries in Timor-Leste. We believe that the success of the IBSA fund is mainly due to the fact that India, Brazil, and South Africa, despite their own resource constraints and their own problems in tackling poverty and their development challenges, have been ready to contribute to the evolving narrative and the evolving needs for South-South partnership for development. And we have found excellent partners, of course, in the United Nations Development Program, but also in all the countries which have participated, whether in Southeast Asia or West Asia, from Africa, the CARICOM region, and they've all been willing to go the extra mile in implementing and replicating the projects which are possible for financing by this particular IBSA Trust Fund. I also want to take advantage of our getting together to say that we see the fund as an exercise in solidarity, which is initiated at the explicit request of a development partner. The issue or the entire expression of burden sharing has very little to do with what we are talking about. This is an initiative which is in keeping with our long-standing commitment on South-South cooperation and in keeping with the principle of aiding and assisting fellow development countries at their request, under their ownership, and as per their needs and what they wish to achieve out of this. I want to end here. I want to say thank you very much once again to His Excellency the Secretary General, to you, Ambassador SYLLA, to all our colleagues here for giving me this opportunity to speak about the IBSA Trust Fund as well as the IBSA Development Forum. I want to, in the end, also mention that in our view, any paradigm in partnership needs to ensure that developing countries have the required policy space for their own development. These partnerships should take into account the differences in development levels between the countries. They need to be flexible and not bound by rigidity of rules and restrictions, and they need to, above all, ensure that the ownership rests with the partners, and it is they who are the driving force, and we need to be there in support and partnership. I thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador.
Merci, Excellence, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, pour cette très riche expérience par la création du fonds IBAS. Nous vous remercions pour ce brillant exposé et sans tarder, nous allons passer la parole à Son Excellence, Monsieur le Ministre Michel PRESUME de la République d'Haïti, qui va nous parler sur le thème suivant, Voies vers la résilience pour les États fragiles, l'expérience du G7. Excellence, Monsieur le Ministre, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me say to Your Excellency Patrick E. Gomez and to the Excellency of the head of regional organization, Excellencies, the representative of the diplomatic corps, Excellencies, the ambassador and head of the international agencies, honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be today as the G7 representative to attend the 40th anniversary of the creation of the ACP group. So then let me take the opportunity to personally thank the Secretary General of the ACP group for his kind invitation to me in my capacity as Deputy Chair of G7 Plus to share some thoughts with the country representative here today on the experiences of the fragile and conflict-affected states and also on pathways toward resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, driven by the principle of solidarity, voluntarism, and cooperation. The G7, which is a voluntary association of 20 fragile and conflict-affected states, was established in Delhi in April 2010 following the successful Accra Level Forum on aid effectiveness in September 2008. Through peer learning amongst our member states and our collective advocacy and influence the way the international community operates in our countries, the G7 family builds pathways toward resilience. The G7 group is currently chaired by Sierra Leone under the leadership of His Excellency Dr. Khalifala Mara, Minister of Finance and Economic Development of Sierra Leone, the Social Envoy, Mrs. Emilia Perez, former Minister of Finance of Timor-Leste. The Secretariat is currently hosted by the government of Timor-Leste under the leadership of Dr. Elda Da Costa, based in Delhi, the capital. The 15 members of G7 countries are also, as you know, member of 15 of those 20 of the ACP group, which has achieved so much over the last 40 years under very difficult conditions. And I have no doubt that the G7, the ACP group, will reinvent itself so that it can continue to accomplish much more for the economic development of its members in the coming years. Ladies and gentlemen, the New Deal engagement for fragile states launched in Busan, South Korea in 2011 promised to change the way national and international partners work together to promote peace building and state building in countries affected by conflict and fragilities. 43 countries and organizations, including G7 plus countries, have seen endorsed it. The main thrust of the New Deal is that without country ownership and leadership, underpinned by inclusive dialogue, progress is unlikely. It also calls on donors to work more transparently and make real progress in pooling their efforts in support of this country leadership. It is necessary to assist those countries in need. But while using aid to strengthen resiliency, it is also paramount to use state institutions and their legal system as much as possible in the context of international cooperation with G7 plus countries, with a view, of course, to building state capacities. The New Deal comprises 5 peace-building and state-building goals, which I'm sure you know them, but let me just enumerate them. 1, inclusive policies, security, justice, economic foundations, and revenue services. These goals are interlinked with 2 related commitments, which are focus and trust, both at the international and national level. Since its inception in 2011, the New Deal has been implemented in Afghanistan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, Somalia, South Sudan, Sierra Leone, and Timor-Leste. So far, the results have been mixed, as we are still in the piloting phase, But I'm pleased to say that the ambition of changing the formula of engagement is showing some early sign of improvement. Furthermore, the scope of the New Deal is evolving to embrace frameworks to address some of the fragile state challenges that have emerged since the Ebola crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, in commemorating the 40th anniversary of the ACP Group, we need to remember our commitments to advancing human development, eradicating poverty, and securing a sustainable future. The world took a great step forward in 2000 when the United Nations agreed on the Millennium Development Goal. The Millennium Development Goal, which is expiring this year, September 2015, focus on the global development effort on achieving 8 goals that address poverty, education, gender, child mortality, maternal health, disease, environmental sustainability, and development fundings. Since the adoption of the Millennium Development Goals, one must recognize that the world has experienced unprecedented human progress. We have seen hundreds of millions of people lifted from poverty and improved health and education outcome across many countries of the world, including my own country, Haiti. However, it is important to note that much of this progress is not because of the global development effort or the fundings, but because of the rise of Asia, in particular China. But it is also important to note that still there are 1.5 billion people living in poverty in fragile and conflict-affected nations that have not achieved even a single Millennium Development Goal by September 2015. The common factor in many of the nations left behind, despite the Millennium Development Initiative, is conflict and fragility. Sometimes a truth is so obvious that it is easily overlooked. The truth we have learned through bitter experience in G7 countries is that we must have peace, strong and stable institutions, strong and committed civil society before our country can even begin to rebuild as a state in order to achieve economic and social development. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, there was not a Millennium Development Goal that truly addressed this fundamental truth. We must ensure we do not ignore the obvious as we work together to formulate the post-2015 development agenda. I am very pleased to see that a peace-related goal, which is goal number 16 of the 17 Sunshine Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal, suggested by the Open Working Group in New York. And that goal, 716, is read as follows: to promote peaceful, inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. By this goal, the group is attempting to finally address the peace and state building issues in attacking to the key characteristic of the problem facing fragile and conflict-affected states. in a synthesis report entitled The Road to Dignity in 2030, Ending Poverty, Transforming All Lives, and Protecting the Planet, issued in December 2014, the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon put the emphasis on the need for the 17 goals to be considered in the next Sustainable Development Goals. Ladies and gentlemen, as we embark upon the process of consolidating peace and building our institutions, we discover that our experience was not unique. There were other nations around the world which were fragile or affected by conflict that were not on track to achieve not a single Millennium Development Goal. We came together to speak with one voice as the G7 Plus group of fragile and conflict-affected nations. The G7 Plus now have 20 nations ranging from the Caribbean, Africa, Middle East, Asia, and the Pacific that have learned through bitter experience that the global development framework will not work without a focus on peace building and state building. For example, let's look at a glance some countries like Haiti. While Haiti has made remarkable progress in many areas, despite the devastating earthquake, Haiti is not on track to reach all targets set under the Millennium Development Goal. This is perhaps in part because Haiti is still grappling with fragilities, instabilities, chaos sometimes. Sadly, the crisis in South Sudan, Central African Republic, is the most recent example of the hope of development progress being completely destroyed by conflict and the failure of state institutions. And then there are the Ebola crisis, gripping West African nations, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, that highlight the critical need for capable institutions to address what could become a global health crisis. The same applies to G7 plus countries also. It is also because following independence and despite extensive assistance from the international community, most of the G7 countries found themselves trapped in a cycle of violence and unrest. Today, we are witnessing the crisis unfolding in Yemen, Burundi, and elsewhere. Overall, this crisis wrapped out years of development progress, and we realized that our problem was not that we were poor, but that our institutions were weak and too weak. After much national reflection, we decided we had to make our number one priority the peaceful resolution of our differences. The G7 Plus is now promoting an international campaign motto, namely Goodbye Conflict and Welcome Development. With a view to curbing conflict and violence, we realize that there can't be no development if there is chaos. The leaders and the community soon will realize that without peace, they would betray the dream of all those who die in the quest for independence. Ladies and gentlemen, moving forward, the G7 Plus has found a new formula in implementing fragile to fragile cooperation, known as F2F, a subset of the South to South cooperation. F2F set the principle, objective, and modalities of the way our member states work together. I will. Give me 1 minute. Work together to achieving their joint ambition and building pathway toward resilience. This framework is based on 3 main pillars: implementation of the New Deal, dealing with acute and emerging crises, peer learning and on natural resources management, public finance management, and peace building and reconciliation. I will leave you the text, so let me just conclude. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, seeing we are serious about having sustainable development goals that will have a transformative impact on human development and global peace and security in G7 countries, we have chosen a strategy, a standalone goal that addresses peace building and an effective, accountable, inclusive institution. I urge ACP Group and the international community to embrace this goal so we can ensure that no nation and no people are left behind by the goal development agenda in the next 15 years. And so, as we look into the future, I hope that we G7 countries leaders associate also with ACP Group organization can move away from the vicious cycle of conflict and instabilities and forge the virtuous circle of peace, stability, and development. With the right policy and institution to deliver the service, I am sure we could move out of fragility toward resilience in the coming years, and this will be our consuming agenda. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Chers collègues distingués invités, le problème d'un modérateur, c'est le management du temps. Et le temps presse, donc je suggère, surtout certains de nos invités doivent quitter, parce que l'Union européenne prépare le sommet avec l'Amérique latine. Nous allons prendre les 3 prochains orateurs et discuter le tout ensemble pour gagner du temps. Je commence par son Excellence M. Demelo, le directeur général de la DEFCO, qui doit nous quitter pour faire un exposé sur l'Europe dans les partenariats mondiaux en matière de développement. Nous vous remercions d'être venus et comme l'a dit le président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies aujourd'hui, la coopération entre les ACP et l'Union européenne est vraiment exemplaire. Il est rare de voir un tel partenariat qui a duré 40 ans, mais nous espérons, M. Demelo, que ça va durer encore 40 ans. Merci beaucoup et bonne arrivée. Je vous en prie.
Merci beaucoup, Son Excellence Ambassadeur SYLLA. Je voudrais vous remercier pour l'opportunité de participer à cette importante réunion et de pouvoir m'exprimer devant nous au nom de la Commission européenne et de l'Union européenne. Thank you very much, Ambassador Gomez, Secretary General. This is a very good opportunity to be together again and to have opportunity to discuss these important issues in the framework of our cooperation. Si vous me permettez, Monsieur le Président, comme vous le savez très bien, il y a 6 membres du groupe ACP qui sont des pays de langue officielle portugaise. Okay. Donc, si vous me permettez d'utiliser aussi ma langue maternelle,
très bien.
Je vais le faire.
Avec plaisir.
Qui est aussi une langue officielle de l'Union européenne.
Exactement. Et de l'ACP aussi.
Excelências, senhores ministros, senhores e senhoras embaixadores, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, é com grande honra, mas também com grande prazer, que estou aqui hoje participando nesta reunião para partilhar das comemorações do 40º aniversário da parceria entre os países da África, Caraíbas e Pacífico e a União Europeia e de tentar refletir um pouco como é que esta parceria se tem desenvolvido e como é que poderá continuar. Como sabem, as parcerias estão ao centro da filosofia mesmo da existência da União Europeia. É este conceito de partilha, de colaboração, de respeito pelos outros, de paz, que está na base da razão de ser da União Europeia e no facto que 28 Estados soberanos são hoje membros desta União. A parceria entre os Estados-membros e com as instituições da União é o nosso ADN, é a nossa razão de ser. Parcerias que são verdadeiras e substanciais são também parcerias que são vivas. São parcerias que se desenvolvem, que evolvem com o tempo e que se devem adaptar à evolução e às realidades do mundo. O essencial das parcerias é que encerrem em si a força para se renovarem e para continuarem. O Sr. Presidente falava-nos hoje de manhã de um casamento de 40 anos. Os casamentos são parcerias particulares que necessitam em permanência de um esforço de renovação para que se mantenham vivas. Penso que é o mesmo caso com a nossa parceria. Do nosso lado, o que nós queremos é criar as condições para que essa parceria seja válida, continue a justificar-se e se reforce. Estamos num mundo em grande mudança e quando olhamos para 40 anos atrás, quando este grupo foi criado, e para o nosso mundo de hoje, tanta coisa mudou tão fundamentalmente. A começar por nós, a Europa era um continente profundamente dividido. Metade do continente não tinha as liberdades fundamentais de que nós beneficiávamos do lado ocidental e ambicionava a essas liberdades e aos padrões de desenvolvimento. Nessa altura, a parceria entre o Grupo ACP e o que era ainda na altura a Comunidade Económica Europeia foi ancorada de uma forma muito sólida na relação entre os países membros do Grupo ACP e os Estados-membros da União Europeia em áreas muito importantes, como a cooperação para o desenvolvimento, mas também o comércio. Como os tempos mudaram, e por vezes dizemos que sorte tivemos de ver estas mudanças todas em tão pouco tempo. Não só mudaram na Europa, como mudaram no Grupo ACP, como mudaram no mundo em geral. A Comunidade Económica Europeia é hoje a União Europeia. E como Václav Havel disse, é uma pátria das nossas pátrias. Tornou-se maior e mais forte. Tornou-se uma união de valores que são também promovidos nas nossas relações externas. O Grupo ACP também cresceu e inclui hoje 79 Estados. O âmbito das atividades, das políticas, estendeu-se para além da cooperação ao desenvolvimento, para além do comércio, e hoje em dia temos mecanismos de coordenação em muitas áreas, e nomeadamente um muito importante diálogo político. O mundo à nossa volta mudou de uma forma absolutamente fundamental. O fim da Guerra Fria, o impacto da globalização. A própria lista dos intervenientes nesta sessão é demonstrativa de como o mundo evoluiu e permitam, para além do grupo ACP, que manifeste também a nossa alegria de ver à volta desta mesa representantes de outras grandes nações, nomeadamente do Brasil, da Índia e da Turquia. Países que eram considerados ainda há alguns anos como países em desenvolvimento viraram economias emergentes e são hoje países, grandes potências mundiais. novos grupos e grupos institucionais, como o G20, tornaram-se em estruturas centrais do diálogo internacional para trover respostas para as questões económicas e financeiras e sociais do mundo. E transformaram-se em plataformas muito importantes para a voz das novas potências poder ser ouvida na mesma base com todos os outros. Estes novos desafios afetam todos os Estados e subiram de uma forma significativa nos últimos anos. O mais significativo e talvez mais evidente de todos é o impacto das alterações climáticas. E penso que é evidente para todos que ou conseguimos todos, juntos, em conjunto, ultrapassar este problema, ou vamos todos, juntos, em conjunto, ser vítimas dos seus efeitos. 2015 é um ano particularmente importante para nós. É um ano de charneira para o desenvolvimento. Estas 3 conferências que se sucedem, às quais se juntam outras que já tiveram lugar ou que vão ter lugar, como a Conferência de Sendai ou a Conferência da Organização Mundial do Comércio em Nairobi, mostram a importância e o impacto e a forma como o multilateralismo está muito mais forte do que por vezes se pensa. Está vivo, está aqui e nós suportamos-lo inteiramente. Mas nós temos também que pensar como é que adaptamos a nossa parceria para que ela possa evoluir e viver. Temos que discutir entre nós como é que vamos desenvolver o quadro pós-Cotonou, que é um elemento central das relações externas da União Europeia. A nova visão tem que tomar em consideração as novas realidades. Os novos atores, os novos desafios mundiais, como a paz e a segurança, os novos interesses económicos, os novos métodos de cooperação, os desafios demográficos, os desafios climáticos. Enquanto a cooperação ao desenvolvimento continua a ser um elemento muito importante da nossa colaboração, e vai certamente continuar a ser, estas outras dimensões devem, em nossa opinião, ser tomadas em consideração e fazer parte dos nossos futuros acordos. Isto também quer dizer que é necessário olhar para os instrumentos de cooperação, para ver se são ainda adaptados e a forma como os podemos modernizar. Mas a nossa relação não pode ser vista isoladamente das realidades que são as realidades do nosso mundo de hoje. Antes, pelo contrário, penso que devem poder beneficiar dessas novas realidades e ajudar a reforçar-nos. Isto deve naturalmente ser baseado nos nossos interesses comuns, neste mundo moderno, cada vez mais afastada da pura relação doador-beneficiário, mas numa parceria cada vez mais entre iguais. E a minha opinião deve também permitir ao Grupo ACP de ter um papel mais importante e mais influente nas relações com outros grupos de Estados, na influência do diálogo no mundo e tornar-se mais visível politicamente e mais influente na agenda internacional, como foi proposto no relatório que foi apresentado pelo embaixador Dr. Patrick Gomes. Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, daqui a poucas semanas estaremos todos inteiramente implicados na terceira Conferência Internacional para o Financiamento do Desenvolvimento, que terá lugar, como sabem, em Addis Abeba a partir de 13 de julho. Seguir-se-á a reunião de Nova Iorque, que deverá decidir sobre os Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável, e mais tarde, em dezembro, em Paris, a Conferência sobre o Clima. É este o momento de demonstrarmos à comunidade internacional, os ACPs e a União Europeia, e em conjunto, que temos interesses comuns, que queremos afirmá-los, que queremos afirmar a nossa parceria e demonstrar as suas vantagens para nós e para os outros. É a oportunidade de o fazermos. Do nosso lado, queremos fazê-lo e estou certo que do lado dos países ACP essa vontade também existe. E isto será certamente uma base muito forte para que a negociação da nossa parceria pós-Cotonou possa partir em boas bases e possa ser um êxito. Muito obrigado.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Directeur Général, pour ce brillant exposé. Et vous savez qu'il y a aussi Son Excellence, Monsieur Nick Westcott, qui est le Directeur Afrique du service extérieur de l'Union européenne. Il a juste certainement quelques mots à ajouter à ce que Monsieur Demelo vient de nous dire, qui doit nous quitter pour d'autres thèmes. Merci. Merci beaucoup. Merci. 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 Monsieur Westcott, vous avez la parole, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And the Director General has put very concisely but completely the reasons why this relationship is important for us and why we are both very happy to be here to help this celebration. And I will add only 2 words. I don't have a prepared speech, but I will add only 2 words to reinforce some of the points he made. The first is this, that we meet here to celebrate 40 years of a partnership, not just as partners, not just as colleagues, but actually as friends. And it is a quality of the EU-ACP relationship and the relationship between our individual member states and the ACP individual member states, that this is a friendship as well as a partnership. And it is because we share a lot of the same values. And that's what makes it almost a family relationship rather than just a business relationship. And I think that's enormously valuable in this world, that we have 2 groups that can relate in those kind of terms. So we have a lot to celebrate. There have been tremendous achievements over the past 40 years, and it's very good that we have an opportunity to take stock and recall where we have come from, what we have achieved in that time. But our second point is that we are now beginning to look ahead at what happens after 2020, and the post-Cotonou arrangements. And it's very important in considering that we don't see it as simply continuing because we have achieved a lot in the past, we will therefore achieve a lot in the future. This must be a review, as Fernando says, that looks forward. It's not because of what's happened that we need to preserve, survive the relationship. We need to look at what we all collectively need in the future, and therefore whether this relationship is the one that is going to help us achieve those goals for the future. So it must be a forward-looking review that identifies the changes that my colleague referred to, that identify the changes that are even more apparent amongst ACP member states. And we look for a partnership that is appropriate for those challenges that we face in the future. We don't have to hang together on every subject, on everything. We don't have to hunt as a pack on everything. We need to find what is appropriate for what we can achieve through this kind of relationship. I'm confident that there is a tremendous amount we can do, but let's have a forward-looking review and not simply rest on our laurels and say it's been tremendous for 40 years, therefore we must carry on. And that's quite a challenge, but these kind of open conversations that we have will enable us to do that. And with that, my congratulations to everybody here on 40 years of tremendous work, achievement and friendship. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Westcott, pour ce résumé des relations entre l'Union européenne et les ACP, surtout l'avenir, ce qui nous attend après Cotonou en 2020. Sans tarder, je passe la parole à son Excellence, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur de Turquie, Vous savez que la Turquie préside actuellement le groupe G20 et nous souhaitons que la Turquie soit l'un des partenaires préférés des ACP à l'avenir. Monsieur l'ambassadeur, merci d'être venu. Vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for inviting me to address this august body. And of course, I'd like to start off with congratulating you on your 40 years. It's quite an achievement. And before I touch upon the G20 presidency of Turkey, I'd like to mention our relationship with the ACP in a few minutes. In the last 15 years, as Turkey developed itself, I think that we have been able to increase our relationship with ACP countries, economically, commercially, politically, and development-wise as well. And I think that basically the most important moment for us in the last 15 years was our campaign for membership in the Security Council. And in that sense, to be very frank with you, we rediscovered the world. We were able to do that because the world had changed, the Cold War had ended, we had more opportunities, and through development we had more means. And through that also we have opened embassies throughout the world, basically in ACP countries. And just to inform you, today before I came here, I was informed that we will open 2 new embassies, one in Equatorial Guinea and one in Fiji. So if I can now start my presentation on the G20 presidency. We have taken up the presidency last December, and we will conclude it in a summit in Antalya on the 15th and 16th of November. Although we call ourselves the G20, of course, there are a number of countries that can participate. And therefore, the African Union will be represented there, and a new partnership for Africa's development are also invited. Like all presidencies, we have a rather ambitious agenda, or that's how we try to call it. And therefore, we have come up with an easy slogan, the 3 I's: implementation, inclusiveness, and investment. Starting off with implementation. It is, as you had mentioned before, turning words into actions. This is very important. The G20 members have committed themselves to policy measures estimated to lift collective G20 growth by an additional 2.1% over the next 5 years, the so-called 2 in 5 target. The IMF and OECD calculate that implementing G20 growth strategies can generate additional $2 trillion in the world economy. The first accountability report on how much progress we have made towards this target will be presented in this summit in Antalya this year. Secondly, inclusiveness. The G20's overarching aim has been to foster strong, sustainable, and balanced growth. One of our primary goals is to add inclusive growth to this, both at national and international level. We have a moral obligation to address inequality, which also hinders economic growth, worsened by the effects of the global financial crisis. Last year, the G20 made a commitment to reduce the gender gap in the labor force participation by 25% until 2025, the 25 to 25 targets. Its implementation will bring 100 million women into the workforce. That's the estimate. And of course, we also target youth unemployment. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, are another important element. They are the powerhouse of employment, innovation, and entrepreneurial spirit. We launched the World SME Forum on the 23rd of May, just last month, as a new major initiative to drive the contributions of SMEs to the global economic growth. So for the first time, there will be a united and global voice of the SMEs. The low-income developing countries are an important focal point for us as well. Our message: the G20 is not only concerned about its own interests, but its policies should also benefit the entire community. In sum, a better global dialogue. And lastly, investment. Investments that, of course, key to unlocking growth and generating new jobs. And the public sector cannot do it alone. So we need a partnership between the public and the private sector. So we propose that the G20 countries prepare national investment strategies to support their national growth programs. And we have to see what's coming up, and again, they will be submitted to the Antalya Summit. We also have a Sustainable Development Goals Summit in New York in September, as we discussed. It is important that the G20's decisions and actions strengthen the work of the EU, of the UN. Another topic is the G20 agriculture ministers. Food, to be able to support people with regard to sustainable food systems. So we will have the second ministerial meeting. We already had it, I'm sorry. And we believe that we have to meet the challenges of food systems. Energy access, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa, is an important element in our agenda. We have a high-level conference with the participation of African leaders, back-to-back with our G20 Energy Ministers meeting. This will take place in October in Turkey, and we hope that this will be the first time that we have an Energy Ministers meeting, and of course we hope that this will be beneficial to all. And lastly, but not least, with regard to women, we have a meeting in which we will engage with a number of countries to influence gender growth and enhance the role of women in business. Mr. Chairman, there are a number of meetings that has already been mentioned. I'm not going to talk about that to save you time. All to say that we support all the initiatives. We strive in our presidency, the first time that we've had it, to be as inclusive, as innovative as possible, and to help all countries on an equal basis. And Turkey, as it has done itself in the last 15 years, our relationship with the ACP will grow, and we hope to be part of the next 40 years. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Et on voit en Afrique, aujourd'hui, la Turquie a des ambassades dans plusieurs pays africains et les investissements turcs dans nos différents pays ne font que progresser et c'est à encourager. Merci beaucoup d'être venu. Last but not least, Madame va m'excuser, je passe la parole à Madame de Mello, directrice générale de la communauté des pays de langue portugaise, qui va nous parler sur le thème « Au-delà du commerce, le lien entre culture, démocratie et développement dans la coopération intra- et extra-ACP ». Madame, vous avez la parole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you allow me, since I represent the community of Portuguese-speaking countries, I will speak in Portuguese as I see it's possible to do so, and I'll feel much more comfortable. I'll be much more faithful to my ideas. Obrigado, Sr. Presidente. Excelentíssimos senhores representantes dos Estados-membros da CPLP, excelentíssimos senhores representantes dos Estados-membros do Grupo África, Caraíbas e Pacífico, excelentíssimo senhor secretário-geral, Dr. Patrick Gomes, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, excelências. Permitam-me, excelências, antes de mais nada, dar os parabéns ao grupo de países da África, Caraíbas e Pacífico pelo 40º aniversário desde o Acordo de Georgetown, em 1975. Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, a Comunidade dos Países de Língua Portuguesa é uma organização internacional e intergovernamental marcada pela descontinuidade geográfica. Assenta em afinidades culturais e linguísticas, bem como em interesses partilhados. Falo da prossecução de objetivos comuns, incluindo a ambição de desenvolvimento do comércio inclusivo, de aprofundamento do tecido económico intracomunitário e de reforço da integração das economias nacionais na economia global, pelo desenvolvimento das cadeias de valor no plano doméstico e ainda pela qualificação das nossas exportações de bens e de serviços. Não obstante, não somos um espaço regional nem subregional. Dito isto, importa sublinhar que na realidade pluricontinental da CPLP, não constitui uma barreira. Pelo contrário, ela representa um rico leque de oportunidades se a soubermos encarar como realidade multipolar, global, prenhe de desafios. Ela oferece, assim, pelas oportunidades que cria, um imenso potencial de parcerias futuras com o Grupo ACP. Efetivamente, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, os Estados-membros da CPLP estão inseridos em 4 continentes e em diversificados espaços de cooperação e integração regionais, contribuindo esse fator para a riqueza da comunidade, para a potenciação da expansão da língua portuguesa que nos é comum e para uma cooperação multifacetada e intensiva. A língua e a cultura estão na gênese da CPLP e são igualmente dimensões basilares para a construção de uma comunidade que sirva os interesses e o desenvolvimento de todos os seus cidadãos. Além de ser um meio privilegiado de difusão da criação cultural entre os povos que falam o português e de projeção internacional dos seus valores, o nosso idioma comum desempenha um papel vital para o desenvolvimento, garantindo o acesso ao conhecimento, promovendo a nossa diversidade e ainda propiciando o diálogo intercultural. Por outro lado, a integração dos Estados-membros da CPLP em blocos regionais de integração económica e também política, tais como a União Europeia, o Mercosul, a SADC, a CEAC, a CEDEAO e no futuro breve esperamos a ASEAN, não é encarada como um obstáculo intransponível à cooperação e aos fluxos económicos entre os Estados-membros, mas antes, pelo contrário, como um manancial de desafios e de oportunidades. Em sentido lato, a pertença de Estados-membros a diversas organizações regionais comporta um vasto conjunto de oportunidades para a CPLP e para os seus parceiros, se soubermos fazer da nossa comunidade uma organização que simultaneamente seja complementar nos esforços de integração regional de cada um dos seus Estados-membros e um veículo de interligação entre esses blocos e ainda com outros agrupamentos de países. Potenciamos assim a realização das suas políticas em sinergia com as decisões que são consensualizadas na CPLP. Vejamos alguns casos paradigmáticos. A União Europeia, à qual pertence um dos Estados-membros da CPLP, que é o Portugal, promoveu o Acordo de Cotonou, no qual estão envolvidos 8 dos nossos 9 Estados-membros, ou seja, todos os demais, da África e da Ásia, com a única exceção do Brasil. Permitam-me igualmente destacar o programa PIR-PALOP, estabelecido pela União Europeia e que reconhece os países africanos de língua oficial portuguesa como uma entidade de interesses socioculturais comuns e partilhados que tem trazido benefícios para a concretização dos Objetivos de Desenvolvimento do Milénio. Recordo ainda que este Programa de Cooperação Externa da União Europeia também viria a incluir Timor-Leste como beneficiário após a restauração da independência. A sua intervenção tem vindo a refletir-se de forma visível na área da boa governação e, nomeadamente, no apoio institucional e desenvolvimento dos recursos humanos nos domínios da justiça, da administração pública e das estatísticas. Distinto auditório, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, a CPLP é uma plataforma de diálogo multilateral ao serviço da estabilidade, do crescimento económico e do desenvolvimento social dos seus Estados-membros. Nesta senda, a parceria existente entre a União Europeia e os países ACP pode encontrar na CPLP um parceiro internacional para as questões globais, como a boa governação, a segurança, a paz, as migrações, a educação, a ciência, tecnologias, a defesa da democracia e dos direitos humanos, a justiça, entre outras, e as intervenções que me precederam ontem e hoje já tocaram em muitos destes temas. A este cenário não poderei deixar de acrescentar o potencial papel que podemos assumir no estreitamento da cooperação económica, na procura de programas sinérgicos de gestão transparente dos recursos naturais, de desenvolvimento dos setores de transportes, de energia, de plataformas culturais e, o nosso tema é o comércio, uma maior participação do setor privado. Nesta área, realço o compromisso da CPLP com as nossas populações, o qual ficou à partida no ato da fundação em 1996, fixado nos documentos fundadores. refirma a prossecução do progresso dos nossos países, a noção de que o desenvolvimento das relações comerciais e económicas entre os nossos países constitui fator essencial para o fortalecimento dos laços entre povos, entre sociedades civis, entre empresas. Por este motivo, a CPLP acredita e trabalha ainda para a partilha de conhecimento, de qualificações e competências, apostando na importância transversal da educação. Excelências, hoje em dia vivemos em tempos de mudança acelerada, de crescente integração mundial, com uma ordem internacional marcada pela fluidez. Tempos catalisados pelo fenómeno da globalização e pela descoberta de novos repositórios de recursos, os quais permitem a muitos dos Estados-membros da CPLP atingir novos níveis de crescimento, criando condições propícias para o desenvolvimento económico e social. Por estes motivos, os chefes de Estado e de Governo da nossa comunidade, reunidos em Dili na 10ª Cimeira, em julho de 2014, proclamaram a CPLP e a globalização como o lema da atual presidência pro tempore, que está a cargo de Timor-Leste. Estas perspectivas globais só são possíveis graças ao empenho democrático dos nossos governos. Também na defesa e promoção da democracia, a CPLP tem desempenhado um relevante papel em termos de garantia e respeito das instituições democráticas e das soberanias nacionais com justiça e segurança. Dimensões que englobam ainda a cooperação económica e empresarial e a valorização das potencialidades existentes como atividades essenciais ao desenvolvimento dos nossos Estados, através da definição e concretização de projetos de interesse comum, explorando nesse sentido as várias formas de cooperação bilateral, trilateral e multilateral. Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, feita esta breve apresentação, importa concluir que as intersecções que podemos antecipar entre a CPLP e os países ACP, por um lado, entre a CPLP, a União Europeia e os países ACP, por outro lado, são desejáveis, são antevistas como frutíferas e acreditamos estão votadas ao sucesso. A CPLP poderá ser encarada como um instrumento de consecução da cooperação internacional e de aproximação dos povos mediante o estabelecimento de estratégias, plataformas, programas, projetos capazes de consolidar o desenvolvimento das populações. Temos experiência, temos saber fazer, amplamente reconhecidos pelos nossos parceiros. Acrescentarei que entre os nossos países temos vindo a privilegiar a existência de planos estratégicos para garantir o alinhamento na partilha de conhecimento e de boas práticas. Os planos estratégicos têm vindo a assumir-se como fundamentais, de par com a busca da convergência, ao alicerçar as bases para a cooperação real, já com resultados palpáveis. Bons exemplos, vou só citar alguns, são as áreas da saúde, da segurança alimentar e nutricional, da igualdade de género e empoderamento da mulher, dos oceanos, da cultura, educação, ensino superior, ciência e tecnologia. Finalmente, excelências, permitam-me evidenciar o papel da CPLP enquanto ator cada vez de maior relevo na arena internacional, o que traduz-se em inúmeros entendimentos com diversas organizações regionais, subregionais e também no quadro do sistema das Nações Unidas. Procuramos a obtenção de benefícios e de mais-valias mútuas entre os nossos Estados-membros e os nossos parceiros. Acreditamos que juntos teremos maior capacidade para cumprir o desiderato da excelência no desenvolvimento económico e social dos nossos povos, envolvendo o setor privado, a sociedade civil, as universidades, somando os seus esforços aos esforços dos nossos governos para melhorar o ambiente de negócios, promover o comércio e o investimento. Afinal, estamos trabalhando o único meio sustentável de criar postos de trabalho. Temos a certeza que, em parceria, seremos mais fortes na garantia do bem-estar dos nossos cidadãos, na melhoria da qualidade de vida dos nossos povos. Muito obrigada pela vossa atenção. Muito obrigada.
Merci beaucoup, Madame de Mello, pour ce brillant exposé. Et c'est un exemple de réussite pour la coopération intra-CPLP qui peut servir d'exemple pour les ACP aussi. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je vous l'ai dit, le problème du modérateur, c'est le temps, le management du temps. Nous sommes déjà à 12h30. Je devais lever la séance, mais je demanderai aux interprètes de nous donner encore 15 minutes pour échange de vues et l'intermède musical avant d'aller au déjeuner. Donc, Excellence, le débat est ouvert pour une quinzaine de minutes sur tous les sujets qui ont été abordés. S'il y a des remarques, des questions, des propositions, avec plaisir, 15 minutes. Oui, Madame, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je remercie Son Excellence Monsieur Patrick Gomez pour l'invitation qu'il a adressée à l'IAO, l'Institut de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, pour participer à cette auguste rencontre qui est d'un intérêt capital pour l'avenir des pays ACP. Alors, je vais aller droit au but et poser ma question. Ma question, c'est par rapport au transfert des technologies. Vous savez, l'Afrique a un problème, c'est le transfert des technologies. Comment assurer que les innovations qui sont au nord puissent être intégrées au sud et ainsi favoriser le développement. Et je sais qu'un pays ne peut pas se développer sans ces technologies parce que l'Afrique a les ressources naturelles et les matières premières, mais n'a pas les moyens de les exploiter elle-même. Et les contrats qui sont signés avec les multinationales sont très désavantageux pour les États africains. Alors je voudrais savoir si dans le cadre du partenariat Europe-ACP, il n'y a pas une clause qui prévoit le transfert des technologies, ne serait-ce qu'à travers les accords de partenariat économique, par exemple. Parce que la crainte de certains pays exprimée pour justement la signature de ces accords, c'est que ces accords vont peut-être freiner l'industrialisation du continent. Donc il faudrait des garanties pour que, en même temps peut-être que les accords sont signés, on puisse assurer également le transfert des technologies. Il y a aussi bien sûr le problème de l'éducation, de l'ancrage d'une réelle culture démocratique dans nos pays. Tout cela contribue au développement économique, social et culturel de nos pays. Alors, ma question essentielle, c'est vraiment par rapport au transfert des technologies. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Madame, pour cette question très importante. J'ai Madame Tse qui a demandé aussi la parole et il y a le collègue de l'Afrique du Sud.
Thank you. Thank you for your moderation, and thank you for the inspiration of everyone this morning. All the talks I found to be really inspiring in terms of cooperation and South to South. But I had a particular question. With His Excellency PRESUME from Haiti, you talked about and drew out the SDG 16, access to justice, and also named it as one of the key, the lack of that being one of the key characteristics of the problem. And so while we're very excited that this SDG will be now highlighted, access to justice, and we know that also it's been part of ACP's core priorities, I'm wondering if you have thoughts about the problems of implementation of it. And what we recognize too is when you spoke earlier, Ambassador Yenel, about the 3 I's and said one of them is implementation, turning words to action. We recognize that access to justice is something we've talked about for 20, 30 years, but it's the implementation. And if there's any thoughts you have in terms of how are we actually going to turn this dream into reality? Thank you.
Merci, Madame. Monsieur l'ambassadeur de l'Afrique du Sud. Ah, Mozambique. Oui, alors là, vous voyez que le temps a passé, quoi.
Non,
ma sœur, vous m'excusez.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Surtout, vous allez présider cet après-midi.
Vous savez bien que l'Afrique du Sud et le Mozambique, nous sommes voisins, donc il n'y a pas de problème. Merci. E muito obrigado, Senhor Presidente, por me conceder a palavra. E eu gostaria, em primeiro lugar, de congratular as intervenções que foram feitas em geral esta manhã, e em particular a diretora-geral da CPLP, e pela excelente apresentação, e felicitá-la também pela sua contribuição para a internacionalização do português aqui nos ACPs. Eu queria colocar uma questão, embora tenha falado um pouco do que a CPLP tenta fazer, além da questão da língua e da cultura, eu gostaria em particular saber que lugar ou que espaço é que a CPLP vê para uma maior cooperação com este grupo de Estados da África, Caraíbas e Pacífico no futuro. Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente.
Merci, Excellence, pour cette question directe à la CPLP. Maintenant, je passe la parole à Monsieur l'ambassadeur de Guinée-Bissau. Bon, il y a, pardon, Excellence, avec votre permission, on me signale que la charte de l'énergie, au fond, il y a un monsieur qui avait demandé la parole. Vous avez la parole, je vous m'excuse.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Personne ne songera autour de cette table à contester le fait que l'énergie, et non seulement l'accès à l'énergie, mais la valorisation équitable des ressources énergétiques sont des éléments essentiels en Afrique plus que partout ailleurs. Et comme nous avons eu l'occasion de le dire déjà autour de cette table dans des réunions précédentes avec votre organisation, la Charte de l'énergie, qui est une organisation internationale sise à Bruxelles, qui regroupe près de 70 pays et qui gère entre autres un traité, a entrepris, et je ferai écho à ce que M. Demello, le directeur général de DEFCO, a dit il y a quelques minutes, je ferai écho à la richesse d'un partenariat que nous sommes en train de développer avec DEFCO dans le développement de l'énergie et dans le développement de l'état de droit s'agissant de l'énergie en Afrique. Et je n'en veux pour preuve que ce partenariat qui pour nous est essentiel, ce partenariat a d'ores et déjà permis à une quinzaine de pays africains, dont un grand nombre d'ambassadeurs sont ici présents, de rejoindre notre organisation et certains d'entre eux, près d'une dizaine en qualité d'observateurs et donc faisant partie de notre organisation. Et donc je voulais souligner que dans cette organisation, nous nous sentons de plus en plus, je dirais, présents et partageant les mêmes valeurs, puisque hier, le président de la CEDEAO, qui dispose d'un protocole énergie, et qui est un protocole énergie qui est exactement de la même nature et qui contient le même ADN que la charte de l'énergie. Donc je suis convaincu que nous allons continuer à développer cette coopération en s'appuyant déjà sur un grand nombre de pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Je vois le Bénin, je vois le Burkina qui est aussi présent, je vois aussi d'autres pays comme la Mauritanie, comme le Tchad, comme le Nigeria, et pardonnez-moi si j'oublie certains d'autres de ces pays, le Niger. Nous allons continuer ce développement parce que nous sommes convaincus qu'il y a la matière à enrichir non seulement tous les pays d'Afrique concernés, mais peut-être en allant au-delà des pays qui font partie de cette organisation, des pays de Caraïbes et du Pacifique, parce que nous considérons que l'énergie, et ce qui a été dit hier et aujourd'hui l'a bien montré, tous les enjeux qui sont liés au climat, qui in fine ont des incidences directes sur la question de l'énergie, sont des éléments essentiels. Donc je voulais vous dire que nous sommes encouragés, et je suis venu dans cette organisation il y a un peu plus d'un an, nous sommes encouragés à continuer cette collaboration avec votre organisation, parce que nous considérons qu'il y a un intérêt mutuel. Quand je dis mutuel, c'est pour l'ensemble des pays de l'Afrique à développer cette coopération. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président, et je félicite cette organisation pour les 40 années fructueuses qu'elle a mises en œuvre depuis la Convention de Lomé, mais surtout depuis la création de cette organisation. Et je crois que l'énergie peut apporter sa contribution, et en tout cas, notre organisation s'attachera à le faire. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup pour votre intervention. Sans énergie, il n'y a pas de développement. Là, nous le savons dans nos différents pays avec les coupures d'électricité récurrentes dans les différentes capitales. Et merci pour cette coopération que vous offrez aux différents pays des ACP. Dernier orateur avant que nous fassions la conclusion, son Excellence Monsieur l'Ambassadeur de Guinée-Bissau. Vous avez la parole.
Merci. Je voudrais, Monsieur le modérateur, vous le devinez, avant toute chose, remercier les éminentes personnalités qui se sont succédées pour, au travers de leurs interventions, nous faire part à la fois de leur vision, de ce que peut et doit être le partenariat, mais surtout remercier aussi ceux qui ont eu la bonté de partager avec nous l'expérience de leur pays. Je pense notamment au distingué ambassadeur de la Turquie. Monsieur le Président, je voulais juste m'appesantir pendant quelques instants sur la coopération Sud-Sud. Tout le monde se souvient que c'est à Buenos Aires, en 1978 déjà, que les Nations Unies ont consacré, au travers du plan de Buenos Aires, la coopération Sud-Sud. Parce que nous avions tenu là-bas, en 1978, une conférence des Nations Unies sur la promotion et la coopération technique entre pays en développement. Cette coopération Sud-Sud a fait du chemin. Elle a fait du chemin puisqu'elle s'affirme comme étant non seulement un moyen de jeter des ponts entre nos États, mais surtout de faire en sorte que nous puissions, comme il a été suggéré ici, bénéficier des espérances respectives au travers des technologies qui sont plus accessibles pour nos populations, mais surtout aussi au travers aussi de l'expérience des uns et des autres. Nous avons vu comment des pays hier sous-développés ont pu devenir, grâce à des efforts endogènes, parce que le développement est d'abord et surtout une question d'efforts endogènes. Comme il a été dit ici, personne n'est arrivé à se développer grâce à l'aide. L'aide vient en appoint. Je voudrais donc insister sur cette coopération Sud-Sud qui peut prendre plusieurs formes et surtout être très diverses. On peut penser notamment à la coopération trilatérale, etc., triangulaire, comme on a l'habitude de dire. Mais je pense qu'il s'agit là d'un aspect fondamental parce que certes, nous voulons consolider nos relations avec l'Union européenne et M. Nicolas Westcott nous a dit que nous devons avoir une vision prospective de nos relations plutôt que de voir ce qui a été fait et des résultats qui ont été obtenus. Je suis tout à fait d'accord avec lui et je crois que je ne suis pas le seul ici autour de cette table. Mais je pense aussi que la nécessité d'élargir le champ de coopération s'affirme de plus en plus et je crois que la coopération Sud-Sud est un créneau sur lequel nous devons ancrer aussi notre coopération. Ensuite, je vous ai très rapidement remercié Mme de Mello qui nous a fait part de l'aspect culturel. Vous savez, nous avons toujours considéré, nous Cabo Verde et Guinée-Bissau, parce que nous avons toujours dit que tout ce qui se fait, surtout pour se libérer, pour s'émanciper, donc pour se développer, est un acte de culture. Sans culture, il n'y a pas de développement. Parce que c'est au travers de la culture qu'un peuple s'affirme, qu'un peuple peut aller se ressourcer. Donc je ne peux qu'appuyer tout ce qui a été dit ici et me féliciter que nous ayons consacré et reconnu cet espace culturel qui est nécessaire à tout développement. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Je vais passer rapidement la parole d'abord à Mme de Mello, ensuite à Monsieur l'Ambassadeur de Turquie et à Monsieur le Ministre pour quelques commentaires sur des questions posées, notamment la question de Mme Traoré sur le transfert de technologie pour l'industrialisation de nos différents pays. Brièvement, comme déjà le temps est fini. Je vous en prie, Mme de Mello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe there is a space for much cooperation at bilateral, trilateral and multilateral cooperation with the ACP. But beyond the states and governments, we believe there is a huge space for development if we bring in the civil societies, the universities, technology, knowledge, and the private sector. We believe sustainable development, sustainable jobs, and we need jobs in our countries, come from the private sector. So we have to build the bridges in order to bring in the private sector. Of course, bringing in also civil society, their organizations, and universities where knowledge, innovation comes from. So if we do so, there is a huge space for cooperation between CPLP and ACP countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to His Excellency, the Ambassador of Turkey.
Thank you very much for that question. And actually, you've taken the heart of the matter. It's very crucial, and it's probably the hardest part to, implement certain decisions. And I think the key here is follow-up. It's not on justice, it's on many issues. I mean, I know that ministers, prime ministers, and presidents can decide on many things, not only multilaterally, but in one's country as well. And then the bureaucracy can kill it. So the most important thing is a follow-up. It has to be followed up by the leadership. On justice and fairness, I think the crucial thing here is incentive. Because in our countries, developing countries, such as mine as well, if we don't have a fair and justice system, then there won't be any investment. There won't be any growth. So that's why we have to rehaul and make our justice system working with regard to bringing in investment. So there has to be some kind of investment. I know this is not the complete answer, but you need to follow it up, not on justice, but in all fields as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Now I give the floor to His Excellency, the Minister, Michel PRESUME from Haïti, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je crois que la question de justice est une question fondamentale et c'est pour ça que nous avons mis l'accent. Et je suis tout à fait conscient et d'accord avec vous qu'il ne suffit pas de parler de justice, il faut voir vraiment comment améliorer les conditions de justice dans nos pays. Donc, ce qu'il faut pour avoir une bonne justice, nous le savons. Ce que nous ne maîtrisons pas tout à fait, c'est les problèmes inhérents qui font que la justice dans les pays comme le mien, par exemple, Haïti, était capable de résister aux assauts venant de tous bords. La première raison, c'est que ce sont les institutions. C'est que la justice est dépendante trop de la politique. C'est une des conditions qui fait que la justice est incapable d'être fair, honnête et juste. La deuxième raison, c'est l'instabilité sociale due à un problème d'éducation et un problème économique. Dans un pays comme Haïti, où plus que 60% de la population sont des jeunes de moins de 30 ans et qui n'ont pas un emploi et qui ont un niveau d'éducation extrêmement faible, vous pouvez comprendre l'instabilité, la volatilité qu'il y a pour vraiment contrôler tous ces mouvements et s'assurer que la loi soit appliquée. Donc moi je dirais que la première chose à faire, c'est d'abord s'assurer que les institutions soient fortes. Les constitutions haïtiennes, par exemple, je prends cet exemple parce que c'est ce que je connais le plus, et font qu'il y a 3 branches, la justice, l'exécutif et le Parlement, que la justice soit véritablement une institution indépendante des 2 autres pouvoirs, ce qui n'est pas encore le cas. La deuxième raison, c'est qu'il faut mettre la jeunesse au travail et à l'école le plus que possible. Si on arrive à faire ces 2 choses, ces 3 choses, je dirais qu'on est sur la route vers une résolution de ce problème chronique qui ronge nos pays et qui font que aucune initiative pour le développement puisse être vraiment considérée.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Nous allons, vous savez, quand il y a un ministre à côté d'un ambassadeur, c'est l'ambassadeur qui s'efface pour donner la parole au ministre. Je vais prier Monsieur le ministre de la République fédérale des Comores de bien vouloir tirer quelques conclusions avant que M. Patrick Gomes ne finisse la séance. Je vous en prie, Excellence.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de me donner cette occasion de clore cette session qui a été consacrée à l'établissement de partenariats. Une session qui a été honorée par la présence d'éminentes personnalités, mais surtout l'intervention de Son Excellence le Président de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Nous avons échangé plusieurs expériences, celle des IBAS, le G7+, il y a aussi l'expérience de la présidence turque du G20. On a échangé aussi les visions de l'Union européenne sur les partenariats avant quelques échanges de vues. Nous avons retenu essentiellement que l'année 2015 constitue une année charnière pour le développement, non seulement parce que c'est là qu'on est en train de réfléchir l'agenda post-2015, mais surtout, il y a 3 grands rendez-vous pour le développement. Il y a celui d'Addis Abeba en juillet, suivi de celui de New York en septembre, pour finir à Paris avec la COP 21 en décembre. Mais aussi nous avons retenu que pour parvenir au développement, il faut plus de partenariats, mais surtout plus de paix et de stabilité dans nos pays. C'est sur ces mots que, disons, je vais finir mon intervention, parce que j'ai voulu être le plus bref possible, vu qu'on a dépassé de très loin le carnaval agenda qui a été prévu. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. Maintenant, Dr Gomes, quelques remarques avant que nous n'ayons pour le déjeuner. Mais avant d'aller au déjeuner, nous avons un intermède culturel. Nous avons d'éminents artistes qui vont jouer de la kora pour nous et je pense qu'il serait vraiment dommage de ne pas les écouter. Mais pour le moment d'abord, je passe la parole à Dr Gomes. Ensuite, il y a la kora et après, il y a le repas où tout le monde est invité.
Thank you very much, Moderator. First, I have to thank you for moderating, but also to thank especially all those who have come to make presentations and accepted our invitation. We're more than overwhelmed and deeply appreciative of the time and effort you've given to attend, to participate, despite the inconvenience of this conference room and the heat and not properly ventilated either. But we look forward to a new building, so perhaps you'll be better circumstances another time around, depending so much on what happens in our negotiations. But I think it's very significant that we're clearly seeing the geopolitical changes that invite us to come together with a mutuality of interest. But I think fundamentally in those interests has to be development, has to be the eradication of poverty, have to be reducing now what is creeping up alongside the great expanse of wealth, structural inequality. And we will not address that if we aren't looking at it from as many perspectives as possible. And there are structural conditions. Comoros, the Minister, when you speak and we think of climate change, it's an existential threat, the very survival of several others. In the ACP, we are going to carve a path. We intend to be forward-looking, but we intend to carve a path that is quite strategic in where we can make the most impact, but have to rely very clearly on various types of partnerships, in which there will be some disagreements, in which there will be some, not the refinement of completely accepting everything, but at a broad level, we too must have a voice and a visibility at the global arena in the United Nations. And we too want to see the complementarity with our regional organizations. That's why we structured yesterday, to some extent, looking at the regional integration experience, ECOWAS with its success and its challenges. We've come now with seeing where there are new partnerships, the way in which India, Brazil, South Africa has been cooperating. Turkey in the G20's leadership is tremendously important in identifying that inclusiveness, Inclusiveness is a concept that has to come to grips with, in fact, a form of democracy and participation that sees room for all aspects of our society to participate. And I'm very happy that we're building on the cultural diversity, the richness that the ACP brings to the world is in art, in drama, in music, in our thinking also, that we have a diversity and a heterogeneity to draw upon. And in drawing on that, we will complement and also respect our subsidiarity, where we can make the most impact. But it is a process we are involved in. And why 2020 is cited in terms of the relationship with Europe, we're seeing a whole process of transformation of how the world is from the climate conditions, but also how trade. We started with trade and economic cooperation. We want to trade ourselves into development. We're not depending any longer. I used to like to quote, how do we abolish aid so countries can develop? How do we abolish the dependency? And there's a technological dependency we have to face. And there's also the way in which those countries that say they're open to a rules-based trading agreement are now building walls around themselves if they pursue the TTIP in a certain way and raise new barriers. We abolish tariffs, but we need to raise new barriers of regulatory mechanisms. And that brings us back to law and governance. And that's why we can only fight those structural questions together. We have to be together, and that is where the strength will. The strength of the developing world has been that we've come together to transform, and that's what the non-aligned movement did at that time. It's gone in a different way, G77. The ACP has survived because of unity of purpose and solidarity. And now we see it in a new era, and that's what I think we can draw upon. That's why the diversity will be our strength. So we look forward very much to an enjoyable lunch. But also this afternoon, too, we have to look at where the thinking is coming. If we're going to be a knowledge management institution, if some thinking is going to change, and some policies for implementation, as the G20 speaks about, and where we will invest. First investment, in a sense, is our human resources, our skill and our ability. A lot of technology now is very much dependent on what was out of the 18th century industrialization to suit a very narrow group of countries and disregarded the indigenous technology. Indonesia has been irrigating mountainsides and hills for 2,000 years. The Incas of Peru gave us a lot of literature. We know what we built. Africa, in Egypt, with the pyramids. There is great, not only astronomy and mathematics, we haven't drawn on that indigenous knowledge, and that is what we will do together to transform the world. So I'm very much appreciative, and I thank you for coming and sharing with us this great gift. For it's your birthday and our birthday together, 40 years, and we look to the next 40. Thank you.
Bien, merci Monsieur le Secrétaire Général. Je crois que c'était une excellente conclusion. Je voudrais juste dire un mot à Mme Traoré concernant l'industrialisation. Dans toutes nos négociations avec l'Union européenne, nous insistons sur la transformation de nos économies, le transfert de technologies. Et dans la déclaration commune que nous avons élaborée, ACP, Union européenne, pour l'agenda du développement post-2015, et qui sera présentée à New York en septembre, nous avons insisté en tant qu'ACP sur cette industrialisation et ce transfert de technologie. Là, vous avez vraiment raison. 50 ans, bientôt 60 ans d'indépendance, et nous continuons à être toujours des pourvoyeurs de matières premières. Il faut que ça cesse, il faut que nous puissions transformer nos économies. Et là, l'énergie a un rôle capital à jouer, parce que sans énergie, il n'y a pas d'industrialisation. Donc, vous avez parfaitement raison. Et naturellement, nous sommes heureux de vous entendre cet après-midi. Donc, chers collègues, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, cet après-midi, il y a notre sœur, Madame l'ambassadeur de Mozambique, qui va présider. Et nous serons heureux que vous soyez tous présents pour cette session qui débutera à 14h30. Mais en attendant, je passe la parole à Madame la modératrice pour nous annoncer l'intermède musical et les notes de kora que nous allons écouter. En tout cas, de mon côté, je vous dis merci et j'espère que la collaboration a été très positive. Merci beaucoup.
Limania, Duniana, Limania, Jesavani. 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 Limania, Limania, Duniana, Limania, Jesavani. Alina mana ke se ke bato ye jama. Alina mana ke se ke bato ye jama. Alina wolo badwa uko. Alina badwa uko. Limania.
Bien, on se retrouve ici à 14h30, s'il vous plaît. Merci.
What language is it?
Sema na soro kama sira